Saviryam Karvavai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. So may that one protect us all, protect us both together. May He nourish us both. May we work conjointly with great energy and vigor. And may our study be vigorous and effective. May we not mutually cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. We normally start off with, are there any questions? And maybe we could consolidate our positions, so maybe we could move up a little bit so we don't have to. Or come in, yes, come in, yeah. Come in, all is for you. Right. So, there's a spare chair in the front, or is it occupied? Don't worry about the configuration, make a kind of semicircle, it's better. It's the weirdest semicircle I ever saw. All right, good. So any questions? Population of Ajiri, only Basil knows.
So is Brahman aware of the ego?
Is
Brahman aware
Brahman.
Brahman aware of
Brahman
the ego?
or Brahma?
Brahma.
We have to be clear about the terms, all right? So, yeah. Of course, Brahman knows nothing because Brahman is in its pristine state, has no mind, no limbs, nothing, indescribable. And we say that that divine being has form and is formless and is above. The above is what we call Brahman. But Brahman is also the sum totality. So when Brahman uses the power of vivarsha, or the power of apparitional, vivarta, power of apparitional causation, then we find an apparent fragmentation of everything everywhere. The mind is the one that fragments everything. And we see it in its fragmented state, and then we take on board personal ownership of it and orientate everything around ourselves. That's called egoism. Ego, of course, no problem. Ego is a function, just a functionary of the mind. It's just a base for passport purposes, and we can use it nicely. But we have to assert that, and asserting it makes us actively engaged in the world around us, making things better, social activity for the betterment, but also active in our own spiritual life, making an advancement. What we call an advancement is not really going from A to B, it's really unfoldment. So is Brahma the creative aspect of this? Is this aware? Brahma is cosmic mind. Is the cosmic mind all-knowing? Of course. The cosmic mind is all-knowing. We just repeated a prayer, omniscient, omnipotent. See, the all-knowing. So when we reach that Brahma, that vision of God, if you want to put it in theistic language, then an internal shift takes place. Of course, we have to continue with that. Like a pot, we have to shine it continuously. When it gets tarnished, we shine it again. There is no end to it. But in the beginning, shining the pot or polishing the pot is something of an arduous task. But as we now get more used to it and understand what is reflected in a shining surface, then it becomes a joy for us. A joy to see the shining entity. So, this week we are continuing after some long period of absence. The Bhagavad Gita, several weeks have been occupied by various other activities. Last week we had a wonderful talk about Guru Nanak, even though today is Guru Nanak's birthday. But but still, we celebrated again since he couldn't be with us tonight. And I think those who attended the talk were suitably inspired by a simple and straightforward life that was absolutely fearless. And when we see this divine aspect everywhere, the one thing that comes to us, and that is this oneness. And so Guru Nanak's teaching and his revelation begins actually with the number one, Ek. So this one is a symbol of unity. Everything is united, even though it looks separate and different. And our job, where we find our greatest fulfillment, is to find his oneness and to discover this oneness. And so, as part of that, we are studying its separateness, because the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is telling us about manifestations, telling us about the fragmented world. But since there is an entity that has no moving parts, that has no occupation in space, and has no change in evolutionary time, we can't say where it began and where it ends or where it's changing. There's nothing like that. We have no measure against it. But we do know the framework, what's within the framework of time and space. Time, space, function, and causality is the so-called familiar world. And yet, when we observe it, we find some steady observer that doesn't go anywhere. Even in occasional moments, we see it. And so the Upanishads tell us constantly, what is that knowing which we can know everything? Kasmin no Bhagavad Gita Chapter. What is that by knowing which we can know everything? So we have to find that unity of existence. And we find it, we are pushed toward it in a way, because it's like everything else that's growing, we're also growing, the whole of nature is growing in some way. We can find where there's some rudimentary beginning, if you will, because we frame everything in terms of time. That's a convenience for us, that's good for us. And so at the last moments of this Vibhuti Yoga, and yoga is something that is practiced. 18 yogas are here in this Bhagavad Gita. That means 18 practices are available to us. And these are progressive practices also. So the 10th chapter tells us about all the wonderful glories and manifestations that we can use as starting points to create a trail back to this unity of existence. That is why in meditation, for example, there are no such things as distractions. Anything you can take and trace its trail way, way back to the unity of existence. That whole exercise is called meditation, going from the outside to the inside, going back again, take another journey. Doing it in a kind of playful way, doing it as a kind of adventure, not an arduous task. Then it's no longer meditation. And meditation, as we said on the weekend, has no first person singular and no future tense. There's no achievement within it. There's no such thing as competitive meditation. But we start off with what we see, what we understand, and then see what is there a deeper dimension to it. So where we left off, we mentioned that of all the sciences, I am the science of the self, says Shri Krishna. And we mentioned very briefly how we are caught up in knowing the world, skill to know. But of course we'll know the external world, but even that is inscrutable. This inscrutability comes out in modern science, what we call quantum mechanics. At its deepest level, most fundamental level, it's not what we see it is. What we see is something that is a you and a me and a this and a that, and we operate within that framework. We develop a survival formula within that framework. But when you look at it closely, it's not like that at all. And so the Upanishads are scriptures which tell us this from different points of view, again and again and again and again, until the penny drops sometime, one day. Of course, the divine nature, and all nature is divine, gives us a way of highlighting this in our life, giving us some kind of sorrow or difficulty that is more pungent than the rest. Some ouch point where we say, oh, and look for some inspiration. And the Mundaka Upanishad gives us a wonderful example of this, 2 birds on a tree, which I mentioned over the weekend also. So there's one bird, radiant and beautiful, beaming, and a tree, of course, represents life. Even Darwinian evolution wants us to be branches of a tree. Even though that may not be exactly accurate, still it's a very convenient metaphor. Because a tree is not just a tree. A lot of activity happens in the tree, unseen to the human naked eye. Small creatures make their home there. The obvious thing is birds make their home there. And some children make their home there if you build a tree house. Awesome. But we don't see the unseen root. If you didn't know anything about botany, you'd assume there was something just sticking on the surface, sticking out. But underneath there's a huge network that keeps it stable and in the ground. And the tree trunk itself has a certain flexibility, not moved by the wind, or moved by the wind, but in such a way, its own flexibility takes it. This has become an engineering lesson for people building huge buildings, creating things like a pendulum within the building, so that when nature's forces swing it this way, the pendulum moves it that way, moves it the other way, mechanism like that. And so for that reason you're able to build buildings which are enormously tall. So we have to learn the art of observing things in a different way, revaluing things in a different way, if we're able to overcome our so-called normal daily sorrows and difficulties. If this doesn't address them, it's of no value to us. So this has to be practical. But we have to use creative imagination to begin with. So he says, Aksharam akarosmi dandaha samasi kasyacha aham eva kshayaha kalo dato ham vishvato mukha. Of all the letters, every language has this alphabet, some with 26 letters, some with much more, some with enormous amounts, some with over 40. But of the letters, I'm the letter A. The English alphabet says A, and the great philosopher and paleontologist Tirtha Shadan, who was basically a Christian Vedantist, saw things differently, and he writes books describing this Alpha and Omega, which is also mentioned in Christian texts. A beginning and an end, which is actually the same. You start here, it's not that you start here and go there. You start here, that's Alpha, and another point is Omega, and so it goes on. The Alpha and the Omega point are exactly the same things. So we start off with the indispensability of language, because every word has a corresponding concept. There has to be a connection. And so when we look at this carefully, we say, of letters, of all the letters of the alphabet, one thing is indispensable. First of all, what is indispensable in this world? Indispensable is the divine. Without the divine, there's no evolution to the point where we have something called a mutation, FOXP2, the capacity to speak. The FOXP2 is a mutation that science will tell us allows us to communicate, but how do we communicate, or why do we want to communicate? And all animals communicate in their own way. You must have noticed. You must have noticed going to the Dublin Zoo and getting screeched at by many, many interesting creatures who think yet you're interesting enough to screech at. And most of the communication is based around a response to the immediate world. All that communication is to do with food, essentially. It's to do with survival. And it's to do with also procreation. Males dance and the females are supposed to respond. Of course, in the human variety, somehow it's all reversed. But the males are the most attractive, normally, of the species. And you can argue amongst yourselves whether it's true in humans or not. So, in Sanskrit, A is indispensable because most consonants end with A. You don't have to put an extra A on. And And so this is an indispensability, and an indication that the very power of speech comes from this divine. And it is with this very power of speech that we're able to express ourselves emotionally and intellectually. No other animal has this capacity to operate from the neocortex level. And with this, we can now investigate fully, both rationally and experientially, the divine that is within us. And of word compounds and the dual, danda, there is a mechanism in Sanskrit where words are conjoined without losing the meaning, retaining the meaning of each section. And so that means that all this duality which is expressed verbally and in thought has a deep meaning that is retained. We use these sound symbols when we engage in the practice of japa. And on the weekend we were talking about this japa, repetition of a mantra, protective thought, with specific sounds that have an element of a vibrational element, not exactly as was discovered with the insight of yogis, but coming out as a gross form, enough to make some kind of inner transformation, because the whole of the universe is oscillating and vibrating. And we can tune into this consciously, make an effort to do that. Music itself has this effect. You say to somebody asks, would I play music before meditation? Obviously you don't do it during meditation. Do I play music before meditation? And if I say, yeah, if it's helpful you can do it, then I don't have to, no doubt, say, but don't play Metallica. Play something soothe and smooth, something that will pacify the nerves and make a nice rhythm also. You see, the baby in the womb for 9 months is used to the rhythm of the mother's heart. And unfortunately, when it comes into life, it's a joyous moment for everybody except the baby. It's not an accident that the baby comes out kicking and screaming. It's not happy to be out, It was nicely entrenched in a nice, warm and dark place with the mother's heartbeat as a drum beat in the background. Maybe some vague voices and sounds outside that. But used to the gush of the bloodstream going around the mother. It was looked after. It didn't have to look for food. The mother supplied from her own bloodstream. Now, bright light. Even though a baby can't see, still they can be sensitive to the light. And loud noise, all of a sudden. And fortunately it cries because it has to operate the lungs. What a wonderful thing nature is. So it says also this, not only that is dandoha samasi kasya, among all compounds, the dual, but it also says, and the akshaya, the inexhaustible, the everlasting, kalaha, time. I come as time, it means I come as an opportunity. This opportunity fortunately comes to us in units, sequential units, as perceived by us. As perceived by somebody else, it may be different. But as seen by us, we have this mental concept or perception that there is a flow of time. Science will tell you it's not there. But that's the way we view it. This is fortunate for us, because it means that we can observe what's going through the mental field. We can observe some comings and goings, thought arising at one moment, making a peak and diminishing, and leaving a gap where we can put something useful in. What would it put in? The discerning person will put something useful in, even when, and especially when actually, the mind is not particularly occupied with anything special. Brushing the teeth, walking. When the mind is randomly moving, and we have no specific control over it, that's the point where we need to grasp the attention and say, come on. And I said on the weekend, it's just like taking a dog for a walk, you see. A well-trained dog, even if you leave it off the leash, it may go and wander, but it knows, it can call it. Some people will use this control and make sure that the instructions are there in Tamil, for example. So I am truly, what? Inexhaustible time. Time is inexhaustible. And that is why this age has been earmarked as Kali, the time for this expression of Kali, time, the feminine version, meaning a kind of energetic version of it, that also incorporates birth, life and death, and we don't exclude the death, we have to include it. So I come as time. You think that time is something that is personal to you. You have this expression, I ran out of time. What does it mean? Or I don't have time. See, business people will say, you make time. I don't have time. No, the time is there, available, and you can't make time. You only have whatever we operate as the Earth taking a spin or so around the sun. Our measure of this activity is what we reproduce on a clock or a watch. But it's an opportunity, it's a unit to put something useful in and train a conscious mind in a certain direction. Train the attention and steer it deliberately. The untrained mind is our difficulty. Nothing else is our difficulty except the untrained mind. I am the dispenser facing everywhere. There is no place. Not only am I time, but I'm also space. I'm everywhere present. If you have eyes to see, why don't you see? If you have ears to hear, why don't you hear? Within this time and space, I am that. So Brahman, this unmanifest reality, manifests itself actually as Nada Brahman, a sound version, a vibration. When Brahma, first the creator, first makes a movement as it were, it's actually Vak. In the beginning was the Word, says John's Gospel also. See? So this Word, this is the energetic aspect of Brahma. This is the manifesting aspect. And from there we find it grows and grows everywhere. I often look at people's ears. I don't have an ear thing, but because somehow from a single cell, something like an ear, like a bud has grown. Maybe it's a play on word, earbud, I don't know. Something like a bud is grown, and there, a mechanism shaped like a funnel, designed in such a way to induce certain sound waves.
Ear.
Yeah, ear. And then that's interpreted by a very, very complex neurological system. And then an experience which says, okay, let me just check in our library, yes, you're listening to this. It's not straightforward. What a wonderful thing. So the universe is the gross manifestation of this sound reality, this Shabda Brahman. A thing in the world is called Pada Artha, which means a word, means word and its meaning. So a word and its meaning. You can't have a word without its corresponding concept. Even when you repeat certain sounds that you have been taught, and say this is a mantra, part of japa and so on and so forth, it has a corresponding meaning somewhere. And the homogeneous sum total of all sound in the cosmos is this Brahma, whose sound is Om. This Om is Om only to our ears. To the yogic ears, it's something more subtle than that. The very first phase of this monosyllable is, of course, the letter A. A. Pronounced together Om, with a silence afterwards to indicate the transcendent, that which can never be expressed. And so the great Upanishad, the Mandukya Upanishad, dedicated only to the subject, to elucidating what is Om. And A represents the waking state. So you can say, by saying this, the Lord is also saying, this familiar world, all of these individual things of people, places and events are nothing more than a waking world symbolized by and I am that. And I am also and I am beyond it. All of it. So word compounds also in Sanskrit conform to certain principles. And as I say, by compounding them, we don't lose the meaning. We still have the meaning. Ram Krishna is an example of it, compound of Rama and Krishna together. But both the personalities of Rama and Krishna, they maintain their individualities. Nothing is lost by the joining of these two. Now we go on to the next one then. Mrityaha sarvaharaschaham udbhavascha bhavishashtatam kirtihe shrir vakcha narinam smritye medha hridaha kshama. Mrityaha, death. I am all devouring death. Death is the same as time. There's a second. I don't know where it's gone. It's gone forever. It's never going to come back. But it's followed fortunately by another one, which also will have its demise. And we're very shy to discuss this question of death. And yet, every one of us here is on the road to it. But it's not the end, because it's just a cyclical arrangement where death and birth are arranged in a cyclical way. And so my favorite way of saying it is, what's the prerequisite for death? It's birth. And then what's necessary for birth? On the same reasoning, death. It's just a comma, not a full stop. But all devouring, everything gets devoured by it. And it dominates the entire universe. This whole galaxy that is so huge, immeasurably huge, we can't even visualize our own galaxy, is on a crash course to Andromeda. And it will be devoured. There will be a mighty absorption there. Don't worry, it's not in your lifetime. And then I am the prosperity of those who are to be prosperous. Here's where you see the ego, question about the ego comes in. See, we think that we are in control of our life, and we're not. Death is in control. And we don't know where, and we don't know when. And I think there's a story about that taken from the Jataka tales, see. So death comes along, and there was a rabbit who sees this and decides to run away and escape. No, it's my lifetime. You've made a mistake. He goes off into the mountain. And in fact, he's carried off by an eagle. The eagle rescues him. Come on, takes him to his place in the mountains. The rabbit says, thank you for rescuing me from death. But you see, in the mountains there's no food. And every day the eagle looks, first with both eyes, then with one eye. And then while he turns his head, he's still looking. Finally the rabbit gets devoured. And so he was, in fact, the victim, as it were, of death. It just wasn't that place. Of course, the story goes on a little bit more than that, because the death says, oh, you're here. You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be with me. But then, of course, the wrong time. Time and death going together. It's not your life. You're not in control of it. And you're not in control of your prosperity. Any prosperity that you have, it says, I am the prosperity of those who are prosperous, or to be prosperous. You think it's your own effort, puffed up with a great deal of pride, and say, see how prosperous I am, because none of you here are walking with no shoes. None of you here have to find out or think, when is my next meal coming from? Certainly we Swamis don't have to. Then we don't have to think where will we get water from. We have to walk quite a few miles to get the water, and so on. And the deserts are taking over much of the land which we're occupying as humanity. None of us have these particular worries. All we have is Brexit. And that's it. So it's nothing. It has nothing really in comparison. It's all about a scale of proportion. And of the feminine qualities, I am fame, fortune, speech, memory, intelligence, constancy, and forbearance. Fame, fortune, these go together. Fame and fortune. You see, it's very good, it's very easy to give up fortune, not so easy to give up fame. Name and fame is a hook that keeps you tethered. Even on a mild scale, on a grand scale, it's very, very tempting. Because everybody likes to be praised. Nobody likes to be blamed. Everybody likes people to like them. Nobody likes people to hate them. Everybody wants friends. Nobody wants enemies. And so fame is a great, great trap. But it's not yours. I am fame. And these are feminine qualities. Not only feminine in Sanskrit, but we can see them as feminine qualities. And so Lakshmi, I am Lakshmi. First of all, I am Vishnu, the one that pervades everywhere in space and knows every quarter. And now I am Lakshmi, Vishnu's attendant. I am fame, I am fortune. Don't think it belongs to you. I can take them away whenever I like, or give them whenever I like. And then I'm speech and memory and intelligence, this internal world. Whatever comes to you is using not your energy. The power of speech is not yours. It's just like an electrical current supplied to the light. The light can't claim it. It arrives at our station, and what do we do with it? This pocket money every day that's given, called thinking, transferred into energy called speech. One of the most damaging things you can do is not murder somebody, but murder them with your speech, of course. Unkind words that hit to the core, and we don't seem to be bothered by it. No compassion. But the capacity to speak, walk, the capacity to create a vibration, the capacity to communicate so that people understand what's going on in the ephemeral mind. No one can see a thought, but you can transfer a picture of your thought through description. And memory. Memory is so important. I forget why. You see, memory is like a library there. It's one of the great vibrations which are there. One of the great waves in the mind is memory. Memory is there, right knowledge, wrong knowledge, according to Patanjali. Memory. Verbal delusion is also there, and sleep is there. These are the 5 waves in the mind. And what is a dream? Dream is sleep plus memory. The two joined together gives us a dream. But memory is a wonderful storehouse because the whole of nature has to evolve and survive because of its memory. When cells, single cells in the early days begin to combine and realize things are much better as a cooperative movement, and every build on that, which we call evolution, is just memory, is just experience, how to operate within the world, and that all gets accumulated in us as what we sometimes call instinct, a natural impulse to do something. All learned behavior, all of our behavior is learned and comes from the unconscious habit level that we call memory. And when an external stimuli comes in, then it creates a number of links and associations, and we're able to make sense of it, and that is where intelligence also comes in. All of these, fame, fortune, speech, memory, intelligence, can all take personal ownership and give us great damage. We can all make the mistake of deluding ourselves to say, this is me, this is mine, my memories, my intelligence or lack thereof, my speech, my good fortune, my fame. But actually it's all his. And so how do we deal with this that can create so many problems, so many disturbances in the mind, so many interpersonal difficulties, so many difficulties in terms of things and problems and challenges in our life, because it's caused by this ownership aspect of us, the prophet-actor complex. When we put the prophet-actor complex aside, then we have, and do it consistently, we have 2 important qualities. We have this in quality of constancy and forbearance. And kshama is also called forgiveness. Forbearance means going through life, whatever, what cannot be cured has to be endured. Going through life with an element of titiksha, forbearance, not complaining too much. Why? Because the mind, firstly, a logical assessment tells complaining won't change the situation. It may compound it actually. Because complaining sometimes is just poor me. See? Why don't you attend to me? See? I'm feeling depressed one day. I see. Then what's wrong? Then you invent something. Oh, maybe it's my knee. Oh, what's wrong with your knee? Oh, it's been paining for 100 years. Oh, all right. Sympathy and so on. All right. So you see, forbearance is necessary, and with that forbearance comes forgiveness. It's easy to forgive sometimes, but not to forget. And the type of forgiveness we're talking is forgetfulness of the other person's. What we felt was the other person attacking us or being unkind to us or something like that. And constancy, we have to be constant. How do we deal with this ego? A constant game has to be there, where we use this time and steer our attention in a nobler way, in a higher way, bring in other values, strength and beauty and goodness and love and harmony, putting that in, and changing and reforming our habit level. That's necessary. So how do we deal with this fame, fortune, speech, memory, intelligence? Well, in a normal way it's there and it's to our advantage. It's useful to us. But if we take ownership of it, it's no longer useful to us. It's damaging. And therefore constancy and forbearance, the antidote to this danger, also comes from the divine. These are all good qualities. All of these are good when used properly. So life and death are the obverse and reverse of existence. We have to take that into account. We can't just focus on the being born. To the born, death is certain. And the Lord is as much the force of destruction as he is of creation. And just as the rain-bearing clouds are attracted to the verdure or greenness of forests, the grace of the Lord in the form of prosperity comes to those who have made themselves worthy of it. You know, thought is an attractive force. It has a suction from the unconscious level. And when you have goodness in that, when it's steered toward the best, then goodness comes to you. Whatever we have in our storehouse of the unconscious mind will come to us. Whatever we think comes to us. Whatever we meditate on comes to us. If you meditate on an elephant, then you'll have strength of an elephant. If you meditate on a crocodile, then you might want to bite people's legs. Sri Ramakrishna has this to say. It is the cosmic mother that reveals Brahman. Without the Vidyamaya, or revealing power of the mother, who can comprehend Brahman? It's all God's grace. Everything we're talking about is only divine grace. We're totally dependent on it. Without knowing the Shakti, this divine energy, Ishvara, that is God, cannot be known. Brahat sama tata samnam gayatri chandasam aham masanam margasya soham ritunam kushama karaha. Of the Saman hymns, of all the hymns that are mostly like previously, he said, of all the Vedas, I am the Saman, because these are chanted, musical things. So of the Saman hymns, I am the Brihat Saman, and of meters, I am Gayatri. We know how fundamental the Gayatri mantra is. Om Bhubhuva Swaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhyoyana Prachodaya. Let us meditate on that shining one, splendid one, whose light enlightens our intelligence and lights up all things also. That shining, all things shine. So music is one of the means to approach God. And among the Vedas, the Saman abounds with hymns set to music. Both Shiva and Narayana are said to be very fond of the Saman hymns. Ravana, the demon, pleased Shiva by singing this. And in this Veda, again, that portion which is known as this Brihat Saman, is the best. Because it's a combination of music and a sublime subject together, both. Then meter is the characteristic of poetry. Why do we love poetry so much? Because of its rhythmic meter. Because we love symmetry and rhythm. And so the Gayatri meter is something like that. Adoration to the several deities comes in the form of their respective Gayatri, Devi Gayatri, Rudra Gayatri, Brahma Gayatri, Paramhamsa Gayatri. Several other Gayatris may be found in these Vedas. And there's a special merit in the month which is called Margashirsha because in the ancient days this began the year. November, December, this time of year, actually begins the whole year. It's a kind of something special about the season. And so I am that. Whatever is special and delightful and best, I am that. You can see me in that. Can you see me in this? Because it's the best. Can you recognize me? The beauty behind the beauty. The highest behind the best. The most favorable time for spiritual practices is therefore right now, and especially today. An earthly year is a day for the Devas. Margashirsha is the month in December, January, in which the Brahma Muhurtam is contained. A worship of God done in this month has a salutary effect on the mind. And the life of the vegetable kingdom and that of the others too, to some extent, gets suspended in snowy winter. So that's taken into account as well. Jatam chalayitam asmi tejasyanam aham. Jayasmi vyavasyayo sayosmi sattvam sattvatam aham. See, we often think that gambling, life is a kind of gamble. Many people will have a worldview which says that life is a gamble. It's just chance. Things came here by chance. And I suppose, to some extent, we all have to engage in some form of risk. But you see, if done in an honorable way, it becomes an honorable game. And what's behind this Bhagavad Gita is, of course, the Mahabharata, where Yudhishthira finds that he's been tricked in the pursuit of gambling. So I am the gambling of the fraudulent. Even amongst the fraudulent, the highest trait would be a certain calculating aspect. And that calculating aspect is a reflection of an intelligent mind. So I am the intelligence that is able to understand that properly and play the game of life with an element of intelligence. And then I am splendor of the splendid. That means everything is kept in nice balance. I am victory, I am effort, I am the goodness of the good. This whole thing is about keeping everything in balance. We require law. We'll come on to that shortly. The omnipotence, power in man, can be useful and good. And it also can be destructive. The same action that is good can also be destructive. The same energy used in one way can be used to the detriment of ourselves and others in another way. And so, I am the splendor of the splendid. Wherever you see this great splendor, you see it every day, in a sunrise and a sunset. But you see it in human activity and endeavor. You see it in human generosity. If you look for it, you'll find it. And victory, something that is positive, something that comes out for the good. All the time we say, Jai this, Jai that, isn't it? I am effort. I am the goodness of the good. So robbery, forgery, and all of these other things is a kind of energy, a use of energy. But the energy itself comes from the same entity. The commentary here says some forms of gambling require the use of intelligence on which their success depends. Intelligence in all forms comes from Ishvara. As the light of a lamp is equally useful for forgery and for pious reading, the discernment derived from the cosmic intelligence is available both for noble and ignoble purposes. Tejas is the word that is used here for splendor, And the brightness that is evidence on the physique as a result of excellent health, where does it come from? It comes from an inner urge, an inner sense. Victory also consists of the elimination of the bad and the establishment of the good. That means we don't stand around where there's a moral wrong. We stand up for it and fight it. Coming back to Guru Nanak, you'll find that his successors became militant for the good. One lost his head because he was defending Hindus. So at this time of Guru Nanak, we can think of some of those things also. And the primary spiritual quality that you require is strength. Vivekananda said, I only teach the Upanishads, and of that I only teach the message of strength. Strength is required. It requires strength to go against the grain. It requires strength to reform a habit. It requires strength to keep the body healthy and fit. It requires strength to begin spiritual practice. Not to end it, but to begin it. It requires strength to have some intention and pursue it consistently. To take a desire that you have and with great determination and dedication pursue it to the end. It takes great strength for somebody called Nivedita, the dedicated one, to leave her relatively comfortable Western zone and go into a land, a foreign land no less, where she knew that all the difficulties would be there for her. Even in her room there, in Bosapara Lane, there there was no such thing as electric fan or anything like that, in the dead heat, in Victorian clothing, just with a hand fan, and giving her whole life like that in these circumstances. All this takes strength. So, it takes vyashaya is the effort to execute the good and useful. And sutta is the good. We have to promote sutta. Prakriti, nature, is made of these three elements, sutta, rajas and tamas, and the whole spiritual pursuit is a game that continuously puts sattva to the fore, given time. In a unit of time, we take that and assess how much rajas and tamas is there, and overwhelm it with sattvic thoughts and actions. And then Vrishninam Vasudevasmi Pandavanam Dhanajaya Muninam Apyaham Vyasaha Kavinam Oshana Kavihi. Of the Vrishnis, of those people of the Vrishni race, I am Vasudeva, son of Vasudeva, but also Vasudeva, the vastness of all the shining entities. And of the Pandavas, Dhananjaya, the master, the victor of the bow, namely Arjun. And of the sages, because our concentration is something like that. Where throughout the Upanishads we're told, concentration is like stringing a bow, an arrow in a bow, and letting it out to a certain target, a certain specific thing. Taking our attention and concentrating it on one thing. Concentration is the key. And also Dhananjaya, that is Arjun, has come to Sri Krishna, taking refuge in him. You please be my teacher, direct me. And of the sages, of all the rishis, I am Vyasa. Vyasa, on Guru Purnima, we honor one Guru, Vyasa, because Vyasa was the person who coordinated everything for us, tirelessly did it. And of the seers, I am Ushana, the seer. So, see a Muni, a silent one. Rishis are also Munis, and the silent one, Munis. Mauna is a practice of silence. And when we come to this unity of existence that Guru Nanak describes as one, when we come to that, we come to silence also. There's that saying in English, empty vessels make the most noise, I think. So a Muni is one who turns the mind within and realizes this divinity there in the silent, in the stillness of the heart. The sage Vyasa is one who has in this way become perfect jnani, and is also renowned, of course, as Veda Vyasa, Badarayana, Yet other names also, like Krishna, Dvaipayana, and so on, because of his dark complexion and all of that. So the Mahabharata and the 18 celebrated Puranas were all written by him, this Vyasa. And he's also the father of Sukadeva, who was born a Brahmanyan. So it is no wonder that he's viewed as an incarnation of Vishnu itself.
Sorry, who was that? Swamiji was father of Shukadeva.
Yeah,
What was his
Vyasa.
name?
Vyasa.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yes. So he who has an intuitive knowledge of things was a kavi or a poet. We honor poets because they are expressing something of the soul. That's why there's something, some sympathetic entity within us that corresponds when we hear poetry, beautiful music, chant and chai. At least the chant part. So Ushna Kavi was a famous figure. He was also known as Sukra. He had the psychic power to bring the dead to life, even before Jesus. And because of the training he imparted to the ushers, they became very powerful. But these are all teachers in mythology and so on that tell us a story about power and the good use of divine energy. Dandu damayatam asmi nitya asmi jigishitam maunam chaiva asmi gohyanam jnanam jnanavatam aham. Of all the punishments, in life there are many punishers, because you see every immoral act, every unethical thing, even though we may think or may not see any reaction or repercussion. Often a question is asked, so-and-so is so bad, and yet he seems to get away with it. No. The law of nature is such that every action has its equal and opposite reaction, and punishment is there, and so it should be. So of punishers, I am the skepta, the ruling entity, the ruling law of nature. Nature has a law, as well as a lawgiver, and it acts rigorously. And of those that seek victory, I am the statesmanship. There are 4 ways of dealing with an enemy. You can appease an enemy, or you can combat an enemy, or you can possess an enemy, or you can criticize an enemy, but statesmanship is the highest technique, the best technique of all. Diplomacy. Diplomacy is the first route that should be used to spare bloodshed, and is lacking today, I would think. You have some universal bodies that try to keep the peace through this diplomacy, through this diplomatic channel. But if you want to avoid bloodshed in a serious way, won't you talk? Won't you try to understand each other? And after all, the only way we can do that is on the human emotional level, to understand there's some person there, or there's a nation, a collection of people. And when I understand what their position is, and have empathy for them, and they for me, we can surely make some kind of arrangement. We don't have to go and fight and kill each other, particularly in today's world, where there's no justice in fighting. Let me describe what I mean. In these old days where there's a war, it was like a chessboard. You had military people fighting military people on a field. In some cultures, they didn't even require that. In the biblical story of David and Goliath, it was enough for 2 combatants to be there. And it's the first record of alcoholism in the Bible, because it seems that Goliath was there and David gave him a small shot, it went to his head and he got stoned. So there's Goliath there, a huge giant, and rather than destroy all the armies and military and so on and so forth, he was quite happy to put this giant, quite confident that he would combat this puny David, who had such heroism, but had intelligence enough that a slingshot would bring this person down. 2 combatants only, winning a whole war and sparing bloodshed. But there were rules of chivalry. No innocent civilian was affected. Military fought military, and if one military side was short, the other side said, please take some. And then you see on this battlefield, why is Krishna and Arjuna, why are they standing in the middle of the battlefield? Because they're not being attacked. They're standing there waiting. They're waiting for all the conch shells and trumpets to blow and the flags to be raised, and then they attack. But you see, there were rules. They couldn't do it before dawn, and they can't do it after sunset. So you can imagine the scene. One leader and two leaders meet in the center. And how are you? Fine. Have your chaps had breakfast? Yeah, we had breakfast. Good. All right. So maybe in 15 minutes? And that's how you combat. And chariot people couldn't cut down foot soldiers. And you see the whole chessboard is like that. So chess is derived from. And went off to Persia also. So the pawns are the foot soldiers, no doubt about that. And then the horses will be the cavalry and the chariots. And the bishops will be those skilled people like Drona and so on, skilled archers and so on, who know how to combat certain military design strategies. A famous kind of structure was set up that to penetrate it was difficult, something like a maze. And we find that Arjun and others, they managed to penetrate these in this Mahabharata war. And so there was a great skill to it, but no civilian was involved. Of course, the wives, the widows of all these military people were all devastated, because the Mahabharata was a huge war, historical war. And all right, the story has been embellished as time goes on, but the nucleus is there that it must have been such a horrendous war, taking out all the leadership of the day, that it stood in memory for thousands of years. No vulnerable person, no child, no woman, no elderly person, no non-combatant was involved. But today what do we have? We can from a distance put a missile, and no matter how accurately it goes, all civilian casualties will still be there. Or take the other technique, a kind of indirect technique of terrorism, where the vulnerable people are intimidated. It's the vulnerable people that are affected. So today I don't see any justification for it, unless this is self-defense. Thousands and thousands of people are losing their lives. Most touching thing, one of the most touching things I ever saw was going to the fields of Flanders. I had occasion to go there once, and to see how the recreated landscape must have been. It was like hell, somebody described it as. There was just mud, no trees, nothing there. Where now green fields are there and so on. Such a terrible loss of life. And some of the combatants are only 13, 14 years of age. What a devastating thing, terrible thing. Unnecessary loss of life. And this is military fighting, military largely, just on that scale. But not fairly, because chemical warfare was there. And engineers going underneath and blowing people up, blasting people with mines and so on. And civilians would have been involved. And then World War II is there, where civilians were involved in an unprecedented scale. And so statesmanship is a great, great, valuable and divine virtue. The capacity for it, the suggestion of it, the civilization aspect of it, all divinely inspired because of our unique place in the evolutionary journey. And our secrets, I'm also silence. Silence is golden is a statement. And I am the wisdom of the wise. If you're wise, you'll be silent. And so, niti is rendered here as statesmanship. When you come to that point of realization of the inner entity, there's only silence. Nothing can be expressed at that point. And when we come to that Brahman, we find it is only that transcendent entity, that supreme silence. I'd hoped to finish this chapter here, but we don't have long to go, so we'll pick it up next week and conclude it. And at the same time, we'll take up this 11th chapter, having understood all the glories and fragmented aspects of divine glories in the universe, and having recognized it and seen them as threads and trails where we can trace back and get an inner surge because we see the divine there. in everything, through everything, as everything, and beyond it. We now have a cosmic vision. So this is where we leave it today. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. And as usual, food can and should be partaken of.